I was once told by an employee at Anderson's that around 80% of the guitar pedal market is designed with one specific purpose in mind: to add gain to the sound, like a distortion pedal. And whilst I haven't done anything to verify whether or not that's true, because I couldn't be bothered, that does sound about right. And it's hilarious to think, isn't it, if you think of distortion pedals specifically, just how often guitarists go out and waste their money on multiple variations of basically the same thing. Anyway, it turns out I've got 7 of them, and I thought it might be interesting to do a little bit of a compare and contrast and see what those tiny little variations do inspire. See if we can come up with a few different ideas. And I am talking about distortion pedals here specifically, so I'm not including boosters, overdrives or fuzzes. I'm considering that a completely different kettle of fish. So I'll just give you a moment to hit like and subscribe. Ah, thank you. I knew you were a good sort as soon as you clicked on this video, and we'll get started. Okay, first up then we have a real old school classic, the Boss DS1. It's one of those rare things that unites players from Kurt Cobain to Steve Vai, a real classic in the field. If you've got any distortion pedals at all, you've probably got one of these. Very, very simple layout. We have a tone control, a level control and distortion. So tone is going to add top end, treble frequencies to the sound, level is your volume, and distortion adds gain. So let's hear what this one sounds like. Okay, so in the interest of being sort of scientific, I'm going to use this one guitar for all the demos, my trusty Antigua Green Telecaster. I'm just going to leave it on the bridge pickup, because that's what you do with distortion, isn't it? And this is what the amp sounds like on its own. Now you notice it's not completely sparkling clean. There is a little bit of crunch on the amp already. And I know for some people that will invalidate the whole thing. It'd be like, well, no, you've got to use it with a clean amp because da-da-da-da-da-da. And, you know, please go ahead. But the fact of the matter is I never use distortion pedals in front of a completely clean amp because it doesn't sound as good. So that's the end of that. So yeah, the amp sounds like that. And then if we add the DS1, I've got all the controls just at 12 o'clock for a kind of a baseline approach. We go. There's tons of output on that. Really, really gritty sounding. It is one of those distortion sounds I've found where it does wreak a little bit of havoc on the EQ of the note. So by that I mean you often find you lose quite a bit of mid-range with some of these high-gain distortion pedals. You might have had the experience where you're in a band rehearsal and you're proud of your new distortion pedal and you turn it on and you suddenly seem to disappear from the mix even though you've got it up really high. There's often a little bit of mid-range lacking with these, so you often need to bolster it with another device or have a word with the drummer and tell them to calm down a bit with the open hi-hats and the cymbals, because that can really interfere with the signal as well. Because it's quite toppy, it's quite trebly. I'd be perfectly happy to gig with that. I have gigged with that many, many times. As completely standard as it is, I think I paid something like 40 quid for that, brand new. It's not modded or anything like that. Yeah, let's hear it in a little bit of a tune. Right, next up we are having a listen to the TC Electronic Dark Matter. Another very, very affordable one, this one. I seem to remember buying it on the same day as the DS one. But anyway, the layout is getting a little bit more complicated. We have here 4 controls and a toggle switch. So we've got the obvious gain gain control and level control. So distortion and volume. We also have a bass and treble control. So not just the single tone control, but you can really get very specific with the EQ of the note, controlling the bass and the treble. There's also this toggle switch here that says voice. This is essentially like a bass filter. So one setting supposedly has a little bit more cut, a little bit more punch than the other. I think that's a little bit surplus to requirements, if I'm absolutely honest. I think you can do everything you need with the tone of it, with the bass and the treble controls there. But anyway, let's have a listen to this. Okay, so again, here's the guitar sound without the pedal. And with it, again, everything just at 12 o'clock. So it's, first impressions is it's not quite as toppy as the DS1. Doesn't have quite that kind of fizzy high end. So it doesn't saturate the sound with distortion. So it's not as immediately flattering to play. But what I really like about this one is that it kind of does what I think distortion pedals really were initially designed to do, which was replicate the sound of an amp turned up incredibly loudly, which you can't really do legally in most venues anymore. So this, I think, does a very good job of sounding like an amp that's turned up really loud. There's a real richness to the note. Again, without tweaking it, you can add more bass and treble. I've just kept that completely neutral. Really thick and rich, that's nice. It's got a little bit more of that mid-range, so I feel that would probably work a little bit better in most mixes. But yeah, let's have a go. Okay, the third pedal then is the Fulltone OCD. Now, I know what you might be thinking. You might be thinking, hang on, you said you were doing distortion pedals, not overdrive pedals. That's an overdrive pedal, you utter tit. Yeah, well, first of all, I'll thank you to watch your attitude. And second of all, there are some pedals that do both things. And this I would consider one of them. My Exhibit A would be the box it comes in that says overdrive/distortion. This, though, might beg a fairly obvious question. What is the difference between overdrive and distortion? I kind of glossed over it earlier, but it might be worth a brief word or two about what we mean when we say overdrive and distortion and what the differences are. Okay, overdrive versus distortion then. Imagine, if you will, the sound wave made by your guitar, which bobs up and down in a gentle curve like so, the way sound waves typically do. Now what happens when we introduce an overdrive or a distortion pedal into the mix is we really boost that sound wave, but we're also introducing something known as clipping. You might have heard this referred to by its slightly more common name, which is compression. It's essentially where a ceiling is put on how high the sound wave can go before it comes back down again. With what we call an overdrive pedal, you're introducing something called soft clipping, which is where essentially the sound wave hits the ceiling and falls back down in a gentle shaped curve, much in the same fashion as it did without the overdrive pedal. This is why if you get a guitarist talking about their favourite overdrive pedal, they're prone to using words like transparent and organic sounding, because they don't typically alter the fundamental shape of the curve of the sound wave, and they don't fundamentally alter the sound of the guitar or the amp. They just kind of make it a bit richer and louder. What happens with distortion, though, is you're using a much harder clipping. So the sound wave is forced up with a lot more force, and it hits the ceiling a lot sooner and a lot harder. And it then runs flat along the top of the ceiling before coming back down in a much kind of steeper curve. So the sound wave is a lot more square. And this does alter the sound of it really quite drastically. You tend to get a lot more sustain on the note and a lot more harmonic richness. There are a lot more overtones to it, but you do sacrifice, as we mentioned earlier, a little bit of control over the EQ. The mid-range tends to suffer a little bit with some really high gain distortion pedals. So when does overdrive become distortion? Well, rather inconveniently, it's not a very clear-cut thing. I mean, if you consider, for example, a typical track by Stevie Ray Vaughan, the sound of that guitar, I would say, is a classic example of one that is overdriven. If you listen to a typical track by, let's say, Slipknot, the sound of those guitars most definitely qualifies as distorted. But what about a band like AC/DC? Is that overdrive or is that distortion? It's kind of hard to tell. They're sort of a foot in both camps in many respects. So it's not a very clear-cut thing, and to be honest, a lot of pedals do both. An overdrive pedal with a decent amount of gain on tap will definitely be able to take you into distortion, and likewise, a good distortion pedal, if you back the gain down, that will serve you perfectly well as an overdrive pedal. So the Fulltone OCD is a good example of one that really straddles the divide for me, so I thought worthy of inclusion. So let's have a listen. Okay, the layout of the OCD then, we're back to the simple classic design. We've got a volume control, a drive control, and a tone control. There is also a toggle switch on this though, and the two settings for the toggle are HP and LP, which stands for high peak and low peak. And it's high peak where this pedal offers a lot more what we would call distortion. A lot more gain, a lot more kind of bottom end. So that's the setting I've got it on. The LP is typically what you would use for your classic overdrive because there isn't as much coloration to the sound. So again, the amp on its own is that. And when we turn the OCD on, you'll notice one thing straight away. That is an outrageous level of output it's got on that. That's with everything at 12 o'clock. I'll make this one quick before the neighbours call the police. Let's have a listen. Next up then I have another Fulltone pedal. This one is called the Catalyst. Little bit of an oddity, this one. This claims to do everything from a clean boost right up into fuzz. Pretty simple layout. We've got volume and gain. We've also got two little controls there for the treble and bass / mids. So again, you can sculpt the EQ quite specifically, which is nice. And the toggle there moves between flame and spark. We're going to be leaving this on the flame setting. That's where the distortion is going to happen. The spark is more of the clean boost kind of a thing. Let's check it out. Okay, so guitar sound without the pedal. And with. I quite like the sound of that. It's interesting. There's a lot more lower end to that than you get in your average distortion pedal, I think. It doesn't sound kind of overly toppy or fizzy or anything. Again, that's with the EQ controls both set completely level, so the way the bass is kind of set as a default is quite nice. It's very thick sounding. I mean, that's kind of as warm as you could expect a bridge pickup of a Telecaster to sound, I reckon. Alright, I'll see what I can do with it. Next up, we have the MXR Distortion Plus. Real old school favourite, this one. Very big in the 70s and the 80s. Layout, simple as it gets. We have output and we have distortion. Let's hear what it sounds like. Alright, so the dry signal. And with the Distortion Plus. Admittedly, slightly underwhelming with it set at 12 o'clock. I think to give this one a fair crack of the whip, we're going to have to boost the output a little bit. Let's try that again. So that's without it and with it. That's great. To me, that's kind of in the same vein as the Dark Matter. It just sounds like a big old Marshall turned up till it's rumbling on the floor. Yeah, I think you could get a very nice level of output with that. Again, I haven't gone crazy with the distortion there either. I think that's got quite a wide sweep to it, but I'll keep it moderate for now. Let's do a little bit of soloing. My second to last pedal today then, another MXR one, this time the Prime Distortion. The layout has developed a little bit since the Distortion Plus. We've got output distortion and the all-useful tone control. Let's give it a listen. Okay, you know the drill by now. Here's the clean signal. And with the MXR Distortion Plus. Oh. Right, so we're into really high output territory again now. There's that kind of real hard clipping we were talking about. I tell you what, I haven't used that for ages. I really like the sound of that. It's got tons of those overtones, but it's still, yeah, it's still clear. I like it. Let's give it a go. And lastly for today then, I have probably my most boutique distortion pedal. It is this, the Roger Mayer Spitfire distortion pedal. Roger Mayer, in case you didn't know, when Jimi Hendrix relocated to the UK, Roger Mayer hand-built his effects for him, or some of them anyway. And this is as vintage and old school as it gets. There are 2 controls, drive and volume. It doesn't have an input for a power supply, so you have to use a battery. It doesn't have any kind of LED to tell you whether the thing is on or off. It's like being back in the 60s, which, as it turns out, is quite a pain in the arse, because those things would have been quite useful on here. But anyway, let's have a listen. Okay, so guitar sound without the pedal, and with it. As I say, I would have appreciated an input for a power supply and an LED, but I'm inclined to forgive him because that does sound pretty spectacular right there. Some real square wave action going on there. Like we mentioned earlier, that clipping's really coming in strong. I think if we pushed that, we could get it sounding a bit like a fuzz even. It's really saturated, like loads of overtones. I like it. Let's give it a go. So there we go, a little whistle-stop tour through some distortion pedals and what they sound like in their kind of default settings. So I'm genuinely interested to know, did you notice much of a difference? Did you have a favourite? And this may seem like a real indulgent question, what else do you think's worth trying? Please do let me know in the comments. Really hope there was some enjoyable stuff there for you. Please do consider liking and subscribing, and I'll see you with something else very soon. Cheers, bye.